its work. Thank you to everyone who's with us. The topic of the first press conference is the new report on Ukraine. Our speakers are Joe Powell, Acting Director of the Open Government Partnership Support Unit, and Diana Zubko, UNDP Democratic Governance Expert. Diana, the floor is yours. Thank you. Good morning to everyone who joined us. As it has been mentioned, we'll be talking today about the reforms in Ukraine and about implementation of the action plan on implementing the initiative Open Government Partnership within the period of 2014-2015. The initiative itself, the Open Government Partnership, was started in 2011, and that is when Ukraine joined it. The initiative Open Government Partnership is the international platform that unites reformers from almost 70 countries of the world who work so that the governments in these 70 countries are able to more actively react to the citizens' requests and needs. How are they planning to do that? There are 4 instruments. The first one is access to information. Access to information on the work of the authorities. This could be the information which is placed in mass media about some meetings, about the ways how decisions are made. Another type of information, that's the information which should be on the websites of the governmental authorities, and this information could be used by the citizens for their needs and their activities. Another component of the Open Government Partnership is to involve the civil society to decision-making. What is meant is not just one method. Decision-making, this process means participation in the meetings, providing comments, oral comments, via email, everything that would help the citizens to be present during the process of decision-making, not just when they are voting for members of parliament, when they are monitoring who are in the government, but during the work of the government. The next component is introducing high standards of quality in public administration. Here we need to pay attention to services that the authorities provide to citizens. And the 4th component is use of new technologies so that the authorities are more transparent and are accountable to the citizens. So Open Government Partnership does not just help the government to work more professionally at a higher quality, it helps also to do the work which is related to the requests coming from the citizens, and all these types of activities which are the basis of the Open Government Partnership, where the priorities of the UNDP program from the time of development of launching this program, and this program was providing support to the government of Ukraine to establish the cooperation with the civil society. What was that? We were inviting citizens to consultations during the process of developing the action plan. That was the case in 2013-2014 and also in June 2015. Then We have a wonderful instrument, which is assessment of the initiative, and that's independent mechanism of accounting. And we will tell how this mechanism helps to monitor the progress of implementing the action plans. That is the report for 2014-2015. It's already on the website. You can use it for analysis. And this report was presented at a public presentation on Monday, and today we'll say a few words about that. But we can say today that during the implementation of the initiative Open Government Partnership, we see that we do have some successes. For example, in more than 40 municipalities of Ukraine, we are using the instrument which is called Open Budget in UA. This instrument helps to demonstrate how the money from local budgets is spent. The next component is Prozoro, and that is the method of monitoring and participation in public procurement. It's known not just in Ukraine, it's known all over the world. It was presented at the summit Open Government Partnership in Mexico last autumn. The next initiative which will add up to this initiative is the initiative on openness of the parliament. On the 5th of February 2016, Ukraine officially joined the Declaration on Openness of the Parliament and approved the action plan to implement this initiative. The next initiative we would like to mention, which is important, talking about execution of the action plan, is the work with open data and developing the portal with open data. We will, by the beginning of May, we will have more than 300 elements in it. Also, out of all the plans which were in the action plan, we implemented 86%, which is a very good indicator. In the period 2012-2014, we had only 60% of such successful initiatives that were implemented. What were the components in this action plan and why it is so important for Ukraine and for reforms? First of all, it's because a lot of attention is paid to fighting and preventing corruption, and that relates, all our initiatives are directed towards making our authorities more transparent. The next important component is development of electronic democracy, e-democracy. Ukraine is a big country where not everyone can go to Kiev to participate in consideration of a certain issue by the parliament or government. But thanks to e-governance, you can join this initiative, you can submit your proposals, and that component is also in the National Action Plan for 2015-2016. Other components worth mentioning are discussions with the civil society, and we hope that this will be also developed in the next action plan for 2016-2018. For this new action plan to be ambitious, so that the components which are there are measurable. For that, the instrument of independent reporting gives us a very clear analysis and recommendations on how to develop the work on creating the action plan and how to make this work successful, because we see that the people are getting more and more active, and they are not ready to wait long. They want to act now. And how to act now, how to be more active, how to use this report of the independent assessment mechanism. I will ask Joe to say.
Diana, and thanks for the invitation to come to the Ukraine Media Crisis Center. Let me just begin with a little bit of context. So the Open Government Partnership is only 4 years old. It started with 8 founding countries, and there are now 69. And there are thousands of civil society organizations using the Open Government Partnership to work with their government in new and interesting ways to co-create reforms that have a potentially transformative impact on their societies. But why is OGP a political opportunity in Ukraine? First, it is about access to a network of reformers around the world in both civil society and government, all of whom who are battling with similar problems. If you look today from Brazil to Guatemala to Romania to the United States, we have a huge challenge to rebuild trust between citizens and government. It's a challenge everywhere. And it's also a challenge in Ukraine. Millions of people are marching against corruption. Citizens are demanding a more accountable, participatory, and inclusive form of government. We believe in the Open Government Partnership that open government is part of the answer to these challenges. And we believe the ideas come from everywhere, not just from government, but also from civil society, from parliament, from the judiciary, from all parts of the state. And let me just give you a couple of examples of successes we've seen. In the Philippines, we've seen civil society conducting social audits, which mean government spending on infrastructure has a civil society component when they're assessing value for money and seeing if any money was lost to corruption. In Chile, they've made lobbying reforms that have meant people can follow the money in terms of political party financing and influence. And in Sierra Leone, open government is now even part of the constitution. So what progress is Ukraine making? The current action plan, which ends in June this year, had 26 individual reform commitments. These varied, as Diana said, from access to information to civic engagement, e-government, and anti-corruption. Our independent report found that 3 of those commitments were highly ambitious, delivered on time, and clearly relevant to open government. To put that in context, many countries had, we call those starred commitments. So these are the stars in the plan. Many countries did not achieve any stars. So for Ukraine to have 3 stars is still a good start. Specifically, those starred commitments were the law that provides public access to communist-era archives, which have been closed for decades, the draft law submitted to Parliament on improving the oversight of access to public information, and the legal acts that were passed that require government agencies to publish their information in open data. And as Diana said, starting with over 300 priority data sets. And we also have one of the first open parliament plans in the world in Ukraine, which is a great achievement. So those were some of the highlights, but what are the recommendations from the report for improvement in in Ukraine next time. And I would like at this point to congratulate the reporter, Dimitro Kotlia, who couldn't be with us today, but he is available for follow-up comment. So his recommendations for improving the open government process in Ukraine. First, we must have high-level political engagement and ownership on this agenda. We've seen from many other countries that we need ministerial and head of state leadership if the open government reforms are really to be implemented and to have an impact for citizens. So we'll look to the government of Ukraine and the Parliament of Ukraine for renewed political leadership on this agenda. Secondly, we must have effective collaboration with civil society, both in creating the new policy commitments, but also during the implementation. And I'll come on to that a bit later. We also need to involve private sector representatives in the open government conversation. If we're going to make progress on anti-corruption, you must have the private sector at the table. Otherwise, it becomes extremely difficult to make anti-corruption efforts work. Thirdly, we should reform the OGP coordination mechanism in Ukraine to ensure greater ownership from different government agencies that actually have to implement the different parts of the open government plan. And I think so far we have seen some agencies very involved, but some agencies really not buying into this process. So we need to do that. Fourthly, now that Ukrainian civil society and the government is thinking about what new policies to put in the new plan, we need to prioritize amongst them. We need to think about what are the most ambitious and relevant open government reforms for Ukraine right now, where we will add value by including it in the open government partnership plan. I know there are a huge number of different reform efforts happening in Ukraine. We don't want to waste people's time or create competition amongst different initiatives. That's not our philosophy. We want to add value where civil society clearly needs to be involved and where independent accountability on progress can really add value. Finally, we should think about some of the specific policy areas that should be included in the new plan. And let me just suggest 4. The new National Agency on the Prevention of Anti-Corruption, which now has its commissioners, I think as of last week, is a big opportunity for the anti-corruption movement in Ukraine. We need to make sure that its mandate on protection of whistleblowers, political party financing, and conflict of interest monitoring is central to the open government efforts through OGP. Secondly, on extractive industries, we need to ensure that we have public knowledge of who owns the companies involved in oil, gas, and mining. We need to open up the contracting for extractive industries, and we need to disaggregate the data to the level of individual projects so that citizens can really follow the money. Thirdly, on beneficial ownership, we need to make sure the new law on beneficial ownership is well implemented so we know about company ownership. And we also need Ukraine to advocate internationally for other countries to adopt their own beneficial ownership laws. The only way we get to know who owns companies in offshore places like Cyprus or the Cayman Islands is if we have international cooperation on beneficial ownership. And finally, we should bring in some of the successes like ProZorro into the OGP action plan so that Ukraine, the government and civil society of Ukraine can also receive the international recognition that I think is deserved for something like Prozoro. There also needs to be greater involvement of local government. I think one of the things for the Open Government Partnership, one of our challenges, is we deal primarily with the executive branch of government. But we know for these reforms to really make a difference to the people, we must have buy-in at the local government level. So we will hope that as the Ukraine government thinks about the new reforms to be included in OGP, it also includes local government. One final thing I'll just say for, in terms of the Open Government Partnership internationally. There are many countries around the world that have gone through similar moments as Ukraine is going through now. They have experiences that can be learned from here. We were just meeting earlier with a member of parliament who was talking about her interaction with the Georgian parliament in terms of the Open Parliament's agenda. But there are many other issues around access to information, open data, open contracting, anti-corruption, where the Ukrainian reformers could learn from others around the world. We would like to help to bring those reformers from other countries to Ukraine to create a dialogue around the future of the reform effort here. And finally, we would like to see more of an international presence from civil society and government actors in Ukraine at some of the big OGP summits and meetings, where I think they would find a lot of benefit from meeting other reformers from other countries. So I will stop there. I don't know if there are any questions or additional things it would be useful to cover, but maybe Diana can.
I would like to add only one thing to what was said. So this initiative, Open Government Partnership Initiative, it is firstly the partnership. That's why it is important that the sides, the parties that are part of this initiative, that they should be in constant dialogue. And in order this initiative to work, this is not responsibility, only the responsibility of the government or society. Sometimes they say that some of the government agencies that they do not respond, or some public initiatives do not participate enough. But in this search, discrepancies or problems, we should find solutions. And we can find the solution when we are in a dialogue and the work is started. And one of the instruments of such work is Coordination Council of Open Government Partnership in the framework of the working groups. This initiative was realized in this period until 2015, and we hope that in the future these groups will be active, and some governmental bodies will be involved proportionally, and also civil society organizations. And important addition to the plan is that also representatives of international organizations also take part, so UNDP and other organizations, and this results to the synergy, and not only the plans should be successful, but also the reforms should be successful and should be realized with the help of all the parties involved. Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues. Now, questions and comments. Do you have some questions? I have a question.
Mr. Powell, as I know from my sources, you've just met with Zalishchuk Svetlana, member of Ukrainian parliament. Could you clarify what was the purpose of this meeting? What have you discussed? And what other meetings with Ukrainian high officials have you conducted?
Thank you. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss the open parliament agenda in Ukraine. So I think there are two dimensions in Ukraine at the moment around open government. There is the executive branch and the commitments they're making as part of the plan we have been discussing. Then there's the new initiative on open parliaments, which is really thinking about how do we open up the parliamentary process to citizens? How do we make sure they can track votes? They can track the interests of different members of parliament. They have access to committee hearings, all of the papers, all of the procedures. So there is the process of opening up the parliament itself to citizens. And then separately, there are the reforms the government is taking. So it's two distinct, different, related, but different agendas. In terms of other meetings, we were delighted yesterday, on Monday, that Vice Prime Minister Zubko attended the launch of our report. He is head of the OGP Coordination Council in Ukraine, and he took a number of questions from civil society activists around the progress of implementation of the things included in the OGP plan. We also met with some of the international partners in Ukraine and civil society activists like Transparency International, Apora, and many others. Can I just say one thing in addition? We are not naive about how difficult opening up government can be. We fully recognize that transparency and openness is a deeply political process in Ukraine and in any other country in the world. If it really is meaning something, it should be challenging vested interests. It should be redistributing power from the few to the many, and it should be about changing the culture of government. These things are not going to happen in a 2-year time frame. They're going to happen in a 10 or a 15-year time frame. What the Open Government Partnership can do is help accelerate some of that process, and it can guarantee civil society a seat at the table and independent accountability. Now, those two things, I think, are crucial if we are to make progress on some of these issues, even in a difficult context like Ukraine.
Thank you. There was a question. No. Do you have questions? If there's no questions or comments, I think we will end our press conference. Thank you for coming. Until the next time, goodbye.